Hey Bio20s, I'm back again for another lesson. Today we're going to be discussing the immune system and specifically the 3 lines of immune defense. So to start off, I figured instead of explaining it to you, I'd show you a little demo just how quickly bacteria, viruses, and pathogens can spread from person to person. So we have 10 cups here. These 10 cups represent 10 people. Now, one of these cups is infected currently. Now, you can say this is any type of virus, bacteria, pathogen, whatever you want to envision. There's probably one that's on your mind right now, as it is with most people. This particular virus that we're dealing with right now is spread essentially through the little water droplets from your saliva or when you talk, and then they can get on different surfaces, and then if you touch your face, then it can get inside of your body. So it's not airborne, but it is passed through fluid exchange. So what's going to happen here is, let's just say, for example, I'll take this person here. Let's say they come in contact with this person. All right, so this person comes in contact with this person, and so now they've come in contact with one another. And we'll put them, that's about even. So then we'll put them back there. Okay. Now let's say this person comes in contact with this person. So now they're going to come in contact. Once again, we don't know who's infected. Everybody looks the same, right? And that's the danger with this coronavirus, is there can be people who are asymptomatic, or so we're told, that there are people who are asymptomatic that when they go out, they don't know they're sick. And once again, they're mixing fluids, touching things, going to superstore or going to supermarkets, going to grocery stores, going around, and it's no fault of their own, they don't know, right? So we're just gonna continue this for a little bit. People are going around mixing fluids, right? Sharing with one another, and by the end of it, I think we'll do one more here, one more mix. By the end of it, let's find out who's sick. So we're gonna do a little quick test here. So and they're all clear right now, so when you do our test, and this could be similar to, say, the testing they do right now for coronavirus, or the antibody testing that they're researching, so looking to see if a person has been sick and actually has the antibodies in their blood plasma. So when I do this quick test here, if the glass turns pink, it means they have the pathogen. If it's clear, it means they're healthy and they don't have it. So let's take a look here. Okay, we're good. Oh, there's one. Oh, we're good. We're good. Oh, there's a little pink in there. So a person might have it. There's 2 for sure. Nope. There's 3 for sure. Nope. Nope. And there's 4. So just right off the bat, we started with 1 sick person, and now we have 1, 2, 3, 4 infected people, right? And they didn't know. It was just one person transmitting it to another person, that person transmitting it to another person, and that person transmitting it to another person. I think we can count this one too. There just might not be enough in there. So we'll say 5, all right? So we've gone from 1 infected person to half of the population infected. That's how quick it can spread, right? So that's why we need to take these precautionary measures. That's why we have to continue these social distancing measures, washing your hands, avoiding touching your face, avoiding crowded spaces, being very, very cognizant of these things. And if you do have any symptoms, it is essential that you stay home. Because if you're out and about and you have a little bit of a cough or you have a fever, you're doing this outside and you don't know it, right? Because you're passing by people, you're touching things, you could be spreading this around, and then that person then becomes a carrier and they don't know it and they go around and spread it. So I thought this was a good demonstration on kind of how viruses, pathogens, various things that infect our bodies can spread around. Now what I'm going to get into for today's lesson is, how do we fight them? So how do we defend against viruses and bacteria and parasites and things like that? Well, our body has 3 lines of defense. So I'm going to go through the first 2 lines with you here today. Okay, the first 2 lines of defense are considered our non-specific immune response. This means it doesn't matter if it's a virus, a bacteria, whatever it is, it's going to attack it in the same way. So the first 2 lines are not specific to anything, right? It doesn't matter if it's pneumonia or if it is a parasite, malaria, it doesn't matter what it is, your first two lines are there, non-specific to protect you. Your third line of defense, which we'll talk about in the next video lesson, is a specific immune response. So it's very specific to that pathogen or to that virus or to that bacteria. So when I like to think of the immune system, I like to think of, and you can use any analogy you want, but I'm a big Game of Thrones fan, so I use the Game of Thrones as the analogy. So the first line of defense is your body. So I say this is kind of like your walled off city, your fortress, your ice wall. It's there to keep things out. That's the job of the body. And you have a variety of things in your body there to keep things out. So what do I mean by that? Well, number one, skin, right? Skin is huge in terms of keeping things out of your body, right? Things might get on your skin, but they might not get into your body. And of course, this is why it's so important to wash your hands, washing things off of your skin and killing them before they can enter into your body and eventually enter into your bloodstream. Because remember, the goal is to get into your blood, because once something is in your blood, it has a highway to any part of the body it wants. So we gotta keep things out of the blood. So that's our first line of defense. We also have mucous membranes as well to protect against viruses and bacteria. So both cilia and mucus can trap debris and microbes that get into your body. So I know it's kind of gross, but when things go into your nose, the mucus in there is actually a good thing, right? The earwax in your ears, that's a good thing. They're trapping dust and debris and pathogens and just nasty things that are trying to get inside of you, and they don't reach their final location. Tears, saliva, perspiration, these are all ways that we remove and destroy the cell walls of bacteria. So if something gets in your eye and you kind of tear up, it's trying to get it out of your eye, right? Saliva, it's there to kill harmful invaders. Also, stomach acid. We discussed stomach acid in the digestive system. It's there so if we're eating food and there's something nasty in our food, it's there to kill it and neutralize it. So all of these factors are part of our first line of defense, our physical line of defense, keeping things out of our body and out of our blood. Okay, let's move on to the second line of defense. Remember, this is still a non-specific immune response. So it's gonna go regardless of if it's an allergy, if it's a flu, if it's a virus, if it's a bacteria. This is still a non-specific response. Now, for the analogy, I like to think of these as kind of your foot soldiers, or in the case of Game of Thrones, I put in dragons because we're talking about a fever as well. So I included that in there as well. So specifically in terms of what we're including in your body, it's the white blood cells and the macrophages. This is what's gonna happen next. So if the invader gets in, so they've made it past the gates, they've made it past the outer walls, they're now inside of your body. What do? We signal the leukocytes. So now we get the leukocytes, and the leukocytes, remember another name for white blood cell, they come along, they will engulf the microbe and destroy it through a process of phagocytosis. So they'll engulf the microbe, digest it with enzymes, and destroy it. So it's non-specific, so they'll attack anything that gets in, okay? We also have the macrophages, which are bigger white blood cells, macrophage standing for big eater. They'll come along, they too will engulf and destroy foreign particles. They're just much bigger, and they're much better at destroying things and getting rid of anything that should be there. We also might get an inflammatory response. So for example, you stub your toe, you cut yourself, you may have experienced some of these things before. So the tissue gets red, swollen, it gets hot to touch, there might be pain. Why is that? It's because blood is flowing to that area. So it gets red, right, and swollen because blood is rushing to that cut on your toe, filling it with red blood cells and platelets and white blood cells. So that area is being filled up there. Also, you might feel a little warm because it's a localized fever. They're turning the temperature up just in your toe to make sure anything nasty in there gets killed by the heat. Finally, if you notice any pus or inflammation, it's usually signs that you have an infection. Usually signs that that area is infected. Now, pus is kind of nasty to talk about. All it is, that kind of white goop, it's dead white blood cells. So if you have those dead white blood cells coming out of, say, your toe or your finger, you know that cut is infected because your white blood cells are trying to fight off what's ever in there, and they're dying and they're building up because of it. So good idea, as common practice, if you cut yourself, always clean it out with a little bit of water, maybe some rubbing alcohol or some antiseptic. And then also you want to make sure that you put maybe on some healing ointment, some Polysporin, things like that, rub a Band-Aid on it. Just make sure that it's clean, dry, because bacteria, they love warm, moist environments. So we want to make sure that not only are we not speaking moistly, we want to make sure that our cuts and our wounds are not kept warm and moist, because it's not great. It's a breeding ground for bacteria. So make sure you're cleaning your things out. But if you notice these signs, it's usually just an indication that your body's fighting off an infection, right? Usually it'll go away on its own, but if it doesn't, you go to a doctor, especially if it's a bacterial infection. Doctor will prescribe antibiotics, and it usually clears up in a few days to a week. So, all right. One final thing here to discuss, it's the localized response or the body-wide response. We talked about the localized response where, say, your toe or your finger gets warm to touch. Let's say the pathogen is everywhere, you're gonna get a fever. So now you're gonna get a fever where your body, essentially your hypothalamus, it's your thermostat in your brain, it's gonna turn up the heat in your body. So now it's gonna turn up the heat throughout the body, and it's gonna warm things up, trying to kill what's ever inside of you. This is a good thing, right? We're trying to kill, get rid of whatever's inside of you. But if you have a fever for too long, like let's say we turn up the fever and it's not working, and it's there for a day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. If you have a prolonged fever, now we're in trouble. Because if we turn up the heat for too long, we do something to the proteins in our body. We denature them, right? Possibly coagulate them. And now we change the shape of our proteins, our enzymes, our hormones, things like that. So that's very, very dangerous. So prolonged fever can be a pretty nasty thing, but it is our body's way of trying to essentially sweat out the virus or sweat out the bacteria or whatever's making us sick. So here's a quick look at it. So let's say, right, we poke ourselves with something and the pathogen gets through our skin and now into our blood. We're going to have chemical signals that come along, and these chemical signals are going to be released, and they're going to tell our body we need to do something about this problem. So now blood flow is going to increase to the area. We are going to have white blood cells rush to the area. The white blood cells, the macrophages and the leukocytes will come along, ingest, destroy, get rid of anything nasty in there. We might have a little bit of swelling, maybe a little bit of heat in that area. And then also what's going to happen is when they digest the debris and the invaders, we're going to start to promote healing as well. So now platelets are going to start to heal the wound. We're going to make sure it's nice and clean, of course, so it doesn't get infected. And then your body's going to take care of this. Now that's the first 2 lines of defense, all right? So that's line 1 and 2. In the next video, we're going to chat about line 3. And line 3 is a little bit more complicated because we're going to go through the specific response. So there is a specific response if we're dealing with the flu versus if we're dealing with, say, a bacterial infection. So thank you for watching, and we'll chat again soon.